that's important. There she is. That's Audrey. Audrey is a retired educator. Hey, Audrey. She got a honoring line.
Hey, how are you? I'm sorry, I just had to untap here.
I got you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear her okay, Eileen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Is it too loud or?
Yes, she's loud. She
because I hear you. Perfect. Yeah, Audrey, turn your volume down because I heard you real loud when you came in.
Oh, okay. Let me see how to. I'm on my phone, so it kind of throws a little bit of my features are. Let me sort of turn that down. The volume.
Time check, 5:58, 2 minutes before starting time.
I'm gonna run get me a paper towel. I'll be right back.
Where are we?
Okay. Okay, they say they didn't see the attachment. They didn't see the Zoom link. So let me send it to her.
I would like to thank everyone that's in the space with us at the current moment. We appreciate folks that come on time to be with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You are so welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to put that in the space.
I'm one of these. She's one of these on time people. She and I both. We kind of look pet peeves, but Tisha's coming on. She's also a retired educator. Let me let her get on, and then we'll go from there. It's 6:01. We're going to go ahead. Yuvelca, do you want to go ahead and we get started, or?
Well, absolutely. You are the elder in the space. I always ask for the blessing from the elder in the space to begin, and I am following your lead. You are the comet, and I am the tail of your comet, Sister Betty.
Thank you. As we go to our Father in prayer. Eternal Father God, we humbly bow before you today, thanking you for a day we've never seen and a day we'll never see again. We thank you, most gracious and eternal divine Father, for having us today in this space. We thank you for the participants that are on now and the ones that are coming. We ask that you will bless us and give us the wisdom and the knowledge and understanding to do what needs to be done in this world in which we now live to make a difference in the lives of others. We thank you, we honor you, we glorify, and we magnify your holy and your righteous name. It is in your name that I call Allah, and whatever name we call you, the Almighty Divine Creator, we thank you, we honor you. Amen.
Mina mina hoa she namaste. Thank you for that beautiful blessing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, first of all, I'd like to say good evening to everybody. And there's Miss Ingrid that's on. Miss Ingrid, thank you. I'd like to thank you all for being in this space and sharing this space with us. My name is Betty Maddox Battle. I am the founder and executive director of a homicide support group, GRIEVE, which is acronym, and it stands for Grieving Relatives in Every Violent Event. And basically, our mission is to serve as a comprehensive resource hub for families dealing with grief in Georgia and Tennessee, and know that they don't have to suffer alone. Again, I'd like to say thank you. And first of all, let me just say real quick. You asked the question, why are we here? And why now? And I'm glad you asked that question. Our primary purpose today is to remember and never forget those who lost their lives to the senseless gun violence and domestic violence, teen violence, gang violence. And now we've got to add suicide that's being perpetrated in today's society, and to keep their memory alive. And as long as we live, our loved ones also live right here in our hearts and in our thoughts. Today, we will also be highlighting the victim support services and encouraging community involvement. You can make a difference by visiting our website and make a donation. No donation is too small, and it will certainly be appreciated. Our website is grievingrelatives.org. GRIEVINGRelatives.org. As we continue with our evening, I'd like to introduce a young lady, our speaker for this this program that we're having, this session that we're having, and as we navigate through the grief process. This evening, I'd like to introduce Miss Yuvelca Magdalena Reyes. As a mother and grandmother, perpetual loss, survived from the impact of losing her maternal grandparents to homicide. And she is a trauma competent facilitator, certified brain spotting practitioner, and community advocate who helps families transform grief into collective actions. Through Y2BUnique Creations and Grief Soul Work, she supports bereaved parents, birth workers, and community impacted by violence with calm, culturally grounded practices that honor memory and mobilize change. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I introduce to some and present to others. Here to help me welcome her with a warm welcome to the Day of Remembrance for murdered victims, Mrs. Yuvelca Magdalena Reyes. Thank you for sharing your space with us this evening, Ms. Reyes. It's all yours.
Thank you for welcoming into the space, and thank you for taking the time out to collect together. Our initial intention, right? Because we speak in truth and transparency. That's the only way that we make transformative change. And it's been far too long that our communities aren't told the full truth of everything. So we should not start with one another in that manner. So our intention when we were putting together the Voices of Remembrance this evening was to collect those that were willing their stories. And I was collecting stories and putting it together because our full intention is to create a book and make the pen mightier than the sword. But as we were collecting the stories and to give them full justice and let the full stories be heard, we noticed that each participant's story was ranging between 20 and 30 minutes. And to be mindful of everybody's time, to keep it between 6 and 8 p.m., we decided it wouldn't be fair just to share some stories. So we were held back from sharing those stories, and we will be just doing a slide of information to show us how we can collectively make a change. Because when we go to Capitol Hill, to Albany, or to speak to these representatives, and we bring our personal stories, we come with the number of one. And these folks understand numbers and statistics. Not that they don't care about your personal experiences and your stories, but when we come and we overwhelm them with numbers, they have no other choice but to hear. And that's when we make transformative change. So if I may, we put together last minute a presentation. And here we go. In this presentation, we're going to be speaking about honoring lives and turning trauma into action. This was started collectively between Sister Betty, Marlon, and myself. Who am I? I want to speak about our story, which encompasses my grandparents, home invasion, murder, larceny, and then I want to go into how I met Betty Maddox. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to stop my share to make it more personal. I'm in this space with my cousin, Eileen, and I'm going to share you our story through my cousin's eyes and her words. I'm Eileen Aviles, and Yuvelca is my cousin. Our fathers were brothers. Our grandparents were Antonia Peña and Carlos Charlie Peña, the center of our paternal family. And this is the reason why our family sticks together. And it's not just a saying. It was a map for how we lived, how we loved, and how we showed up for one another. Back in the day, Grandma was crowned Miss Ponce as a teenager in Puerto Rico. She was beautiful, spirited, and stubborn in the best way. She met my father's biological father there, but he wasn't present in his life. Carlos Peña stepped in and raised my father Nelson, Luis, which is Yuvelca's dad, and their child in common, our Aunt Emmy. This is our definition of fatherhood, real men that stood up to be the head and protector of the family. They were gentle, but they did not allow anyone to mess with our family. Grandpa was a veteran in Korea, we believe, and Daddy served in Vietnam. Uncle Louis was a cadet, a volunteer fireman, and a custodial engineer. Back then, families often held one son back, so every child wouldn't just go to war. At least that's how we understood it. So Yuvelca's dad, Uncle Louis, was the youngest son who was held back. After being honorably discharged from service, Grandpa became the steady hum in the family. He was the coffee maker and the one who loved to cook, the driver who never complained, and the quiet guardian who made sure Grandma got where she needed to be. Grandma was a mompreneur long before anyone called it that. She didn't finish school, and she had her own kind of math. Little sticks, marks in a notebook, but her numbers always added up. I trailed behind her on Delancey Street. She haggled with the jewelers, compared what was promised on the phone to what she was quoted in person. And she negotiated hard until the math respected the deal. Time and again, she was right. Watching a woman at that time conduct business on her terms was electrifying. Over the years, she ran a botanica with saints, candles, and oils, then a clothing stall at the flea market on Bruckner before it became a church, then jewelry sales right from her home. If one venture slowed down, she pivoted to make things accessible in the neighborhood of mostly low and middle income families. She offered layaway plans and IOUs, but she kept immaculate ledgers and she never lost track of who owed her what. Cooking was not her thing. Grandpa handled that, but she could turn a dining room table into a storefront by noon and a community meeting by evening. We grew up with them in the Bronx. All of us lived in the South Bronx, Spofford Avenue, before moving on up to the East Bronx. We lived near them, with them, or above them, depending on the season of life. 1269 Spofford Avenue by PS 48 across the old juvenile detention center for the youth is where our story starts. Later, my grandmother and my cousin moved to Park Lane in the Soundview area. We moved to 1966 Newbold Avenue behind the Circle in a cul-de-sac. Not quite called Parkchester, but close enough. We rarely lived far apart, about a mile between our childhood homes, but as kids, a mile can feel like a river. That's our family, near, overlapping, braided. The only distance we had was when our family and our aunt moved to Florida as we grew older. Our story holds laughter besides chaos, but that's how life came to us. It was just before Christmas, on Saturday, December 11, 1999. I got the call from my aunt, panicked and broken. Grandma and grandpa murdered. I was in Florida at the time, working late for the holiday contest. My aunt asked me to tell my father, her eldest brother, the firstborn. I called my mother in New York to let her know before letting him know. She was caregiving for my Uncle Nelson, who was very ill. Mom tried to make several phone calls to their apartment on the 11th floor. There was no answer. She said, I'm going to go check on them in person. When my mother reached the building, police were everywhere. She found Aunt Emmy in the hallway, curled in on herself, fetal position against the wall. Mom wasn't allowed to hold her. Emmy's partner, also law enforcement, blocked the way, protective and overwhelmed. Both of them were officers. I could understand him trying to shield her and protect her from the pain from others, but not from family. This is how we recall it. And in moments like that, family pain gets complicated at the threshold. Word reached Daddy last because of his heart, a quadruple bypass years earlier. And because none of us knew how to speak those words to him without breaking something inside of him. But our family speaks plain though. So I told him how I was told. We were in Florida at the time. Everyone else was in the Bronx. Yuvelca's father found out as he arrived home from work and saw the scene in the lobby with the medical examiner moving our grandparents' body, his parents, covered in sheets outside the building. The officers tried to hold him back. They knew he was family from law enforcement. He went full bulldozer, that Peña Thunder, and he was ready to fight them at all costs just to see his mother. They gave him several threats of arrest, and he promised he would cause a bigger scene to merit that arrest if they didn't let him uncover that sheet and see his mother. When they gave in and they allowed him to see her, that was the only thing that calmed him. He kissed her, he touched her face, and you could tell he was trying to process and make sense of it. Yet the storm inside him lowered. Whenever he was in a fury, she was the only one that could calm him. Grandma. That night, we piled into a rental, drove straight from Florida to New York, me, my sister, daddy, and our 2 babies. My son was about 4 years old, and my sister's daughter was 5. And we arrived in the Bronx winter that doesn't forgive. Our grandparents lived on the 11th floor, Yuvelca and her family on the 9th floor of a 22-story building. Neighbors later said that they heard bangs, but nothing. Something, but unsure. But no one opened their door. Antonia was 68. She was found in the living room. Carlos, 69, near the entry hall. Both had been shot. She in the head and torso, and he repeatedly in the head. There was no sign of forced entry. Our teenage cousin came home from school on that Friday afternoon, and she discovered them. She was about 12 years old and called for help. By the next day, on Sunday, December 12th, 2 Bronx teens, 16 and 17 years old, were arrested in what police described as a robbery murder. Those facts align with what our family learned later on. Grandma likely recognized one of the boys at the door because he was connected through a customer's daughter and her boyfriend. And they opened it thinking that it was business to settle. You owe money, you're going to pay. The table near the door, the jewelry displayed, the IOU book, the very things that made her a neighborhood pillar also made her a target. Family memories filled in what the newsprint couldn't. There must have been a scuffle at the door. Grandpa moving from the bedroom when he heard her voice, and the feeling that they fought like hell to protect each other. Some details will always be debated in a family as large and as opinionated as ours. We say that openly, but the violence was intimate and it was planned. Funeral politics, invitations withheld, people in our family were left out because grief can fracture kin for years. Hallway cameras that weren't working, security buzzers that didn't buzz, and then the storm that settles into your body afterwards. You're hyper vigilant. You put bells on the doors. You double check the locks, and you arrange your bed to face the entrance. And you flinch every single time you hear home invasion. The headlines, because people say there's always drugs or gangs involved, but sometimes it's just malice and opportunity in the shape of 2 teenage boys at your door. There's the long road of parole, too. Hearings that reopen the wound, hard questions about accountability versus rehabilitation, the difference between a mastermind and a follower, and what justice looks like when the second boy is still legally and developmentally a child. In our family, we speak both sides. Some of us believe in an eye for an eye. That's the only thing that honors the dead, especially when someone planned to take their life. Others in our family ask, where does the healing begin? For anyone, if no one is allowed to become different than their worst day. We don't force agreement. We tell the truth about the argument itself. We agree on this. When someone intentionally takes a life, as the mastermind did, there must be full accountability. We will never get our grandparents back. Whether the relationships were warm or strained, or we were stepchildren this and half child that, we were family. And this was murder. And that was the focus. We agree on who Antonia and Carlos were, a woman that could turn a dining room table into an economy, and a man who could brew coffee like a blessing. And they loved each other. You could taste it in a cup, and you could taste it, you could see it when his body calmed as he touched her face. We agree that proximity saved us. Our fathers and aunt functioned as adults in their own ways. And we, as cousins, Yuvelca and I, We had no issues visiting one another. Whatever the family gossip that existed, this murder changed the family far more than any rumor could. And we want our story to warn, but also to teach. Discernment. Pretty isn't always safe, and charisma isn't character. Boundaries. Don't hold somebody else's lunch bag or stash their things in your locker. You don't know if it's a gun, drugs, or stolen cash. And if there's a search, you can go down as an accomplice, even if you don't know what's fully going on. Children need to know these things. Choose your circle. Know who you call friend and whether they make you better. Are they a good influence or bad? Because birds of a feather flock together. Conflict skills. Teach conflict resolution in schools, in churches, community rooms, and at home. Street safety without shame. Locks, lights, working cameras, a reliable buzzer, and neighbors who actually look out. That's community care. Gun responsibility. We're not going to be hypocrites here. We come from military, policing, and hunting families, and we were taught gun safety and discipline. Guns are not toys, they're not status. Responsible owners don't act recklessly. This can happen to anyone at any time. People determined to do harm do not follow laws. Much of this was before trauma literacy was common, before mental health talk was mainstream, and before my cousin was a brain spotting facilitator, ordained minister, and death doula. I dreamt about my grandmother every night for a year. No one asked me, but that's what happened to me. I was always reaching for her, but I was disappointed night after night that I couldn't reach her. But the night before her anniversary of death, she took my hand in a dream and led me to the gravesite. She kissed me and said, I want you to have peace. After that, the dream stopped. Grief doesn't leave, it changes shape when love tells you you can rest. And today, I'm honored to stand with my cousin Yuvelca and Miss Betty from GRIEVE, advocating to stop the violence, bringing trauma awareness training, conflict resolution workshops, the power of brain and body healing modalities like brain spotting into the community, and pressing on for legislation that keeps our children, families, elders, and advocates safe. If we can't always stop bad actors from getting guns, then as Yuvelka's husband says, stop manufacturing the guns and the bullets. And in high crime areas, stop easy availability of firearms altogether. But that's policy conversation for another day. And this is our story. If you need deeper trauma work beyond talk therapy, consider brain spotting with my cousin. Thank you for giving me a moment to share that story.
Thank you, Yuvelca. Thank you so very much. And that's the reason why we're here. Everybody have a story to tell. We've had a couple of people to come on, and if it's okay with everyone, I'll go ahead and start. If you don't mind, just for a minute, just tell who you are and what your organization or what your relation is or why you're here. And if it's okay, I'm going to start with Audrey. Would you just tell us, for those who do not know you, I know you well. So will you please go ahead and introduce yourself, ma'am, and mute yourself.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this workshop or this seminar, I should say. My name is Audrey Ramsey, and I was born and raised here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And my story and my reason for being here is because even though it was 35 plus years ago, my brother was murdered. And I tell this story and I bring it to the forefront all the time with regards to violent crimes, period, in our communities and mental health which is now becoming mainstream because my brother's murder was a case of fatal attraction, which was driven by mental health. The young lady who murdered him, along with her accomplice, a young boy, both had mental health issues. Both, as we learned, came from uh, dysfunctional families. And my brother, who was at the age of 25 at the time of this murder, was a very good looking man. And so here is a case where jealousy, anger, and hatred, whatever caused her to want to kill him, is a real delusional problem that's starting to come out more and more in today's society. My brother, murdered by this young girl, was a victim of fatal attraction because she was interested in him. Now, keep in mind, my family knew nothing about him, but she was attracted to him from having met him, I guess, at some party, university campus, is what we were told is how he met her. And then later, when he, I guess, learned that she was only 18 years old, but still in high school, decided he couldn't tolerate that affection from her. And that's when we learned later on that from the Hamilton County Sheriff Department that he was found murdered in his apartment. Her and the boy had uh, approached him at his apartment, really attacked him at his apartment, and he was stabbed 27 times after falling face down. And it was the blow to the head that caused him to fall face down, that the young man, which came out in court, had hit him in the back of the head. But this story, and I'm just now at a stage, some 35 years later, where I can tell it without really breaking down. This story is really twofold. The Hamilton County Sheriff's Department bungled the investigation, which allowed the young woman and boy to get off on second-degree murder because they didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the weapons because it was 15 days before this young girl and boy were arrested. During that 15-day period, they arrested the wrong person who had a criminal record, but there was no association between him and my brother. And so that in itself said a lot about community safety and safety in our communities with regards to the police and the first responders who are responsible for protecting the community.
Yeah,
And
community
that's,
safety is it's a big issue, especially
yes,
in your story, Audrey. And you gave away your full story, and I wanted to let everyone know that your story is one of the stories that we're including in the book that we're creating, because those details must be told. And the way to dig a little bit deeper is to, like when we connected, allow you to share your story in depth so they can take it in. Sometimes we're not able to do that just by speaking, right? Because I hear you saying your story and it's like you want to get in all the details, but there's so much more. Because who was he, right? And a lot of us here, we go into sharing our stories and we want everyone to remember our loved ones. Who were they? What happened? And what can we do forward with that? So I appreciate your share, Audrey. We're going to give everyone about 2 minutes to share their own stories, but I appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to see your story about your brother in print. Thank you for sharing with
thank
us.
you.
You're welcome. Sister Betty, who would you like to call on next?
I'm sorry, Miss Tish Glover. Miss Tish is a retired educator, long time friend who really is my right hand. Miss Glover.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored to be here with you. Yes, my story is a little different. My dad was shot while some kids were trying to while they were trying to take his truck. You know, basically, my dad had this old truck. It kind of reminded you of the one on Sanford and Son that Fred Sanford drove. And I don't know why anybody would want to do it. And he had gone fishing. My dad was quite a colorful character, and Betty, well, her family and my family have known each other, oh God, over 50 years. My mother and one of her relatives were very dear friends, and I consider her family my family. But anyway, these kids wanted this old raggedy blue Fred Sanford like truck. And my dad said, "Oh, you ain't getting my truck. You ain't getting my keys." I don't know why they wanted, the truck was at least 25 years old. And they shot him, and it was just so senseless. And later some boys came and told my brother who did it, and it was just a bunch of crazy teenagers. And our children are in a lot of pain. To just they have no, and then like you say, you know, the frontal lobe of their brain isn't developed where they can understand. And then some of them can be rehabilitated, and some of them can't, unfortunately. And it's really sad. There's so many issues involved. But I am honored to work with each of you, and I'm always available to support Betty and Sister Gwen and all the activities that they do. And I'm honored to meet each of you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Miss Ingrid, can you just introduce yourself, please? Unmute and just introduce and tell us who you are and
Okay.
who your son was, please.
Yes, thank you, Miss Betty. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm honored to be here listening to the stories. My name is Ingrid Smyrna, and my son's name is Andrew Junior Smyrna. He was killed on January 23rd of 2020 by a Georgia state trooper. My son was 32 years old, and he had two children at the time. And he was with a friend who rented a car from Hertz and Hertz Rental. And Hertz Rental reported this car stolen. And my son was driving the car, and the friend was the passenger in the car. And they were driving, coming home to my house, and they saw an unmarked black car following them and decided to pull off of the highway into a local street and park. And they saw that that black car disappeared. And so they decided to leave the location. And as my son, you know, it was a narrow street, so he had to back into someone else. There was a business there, and he was backing into the business driveway to make a left turn. And there was a state trooper come around the corner, no sirens, no warning. And as my son pulled forward to make the left turn, the trooper drove up and hit my son's bumper. And he jumped out of his vehicle, left his vehicle in drive, and started shooting into the car that my son was driving. He shot 7 to 9 bullets. And my son managed to make the turn. He drove about a mile, and I guess that's when he realized that he was shot.
Okay.
And he crashed into a mailbox. They dragged him out the car, handcuffed him, and left him on the side of in the grass to bleed out.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Ingrid. What I want to do, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put you in touch with Miss Yuvelca, so
Yes.
you can get, because it's so compelling. I mean, it's just so much to digest with Ingrid's story, you know. So I'm going to text you her number and
Okay.
her email, her contact information. Or either when you drop it in the chat, Yuvelca, for us, please, everybody, so we can, if we need to get in touch with each other, because this is so critical, you know. And time is of the essence. So thank you so much. I love you so much.
And thank you.
By the grace of God, we all are going to get through with this. Ms. Twyna Feliciano, are you on? If you mind unmuting yourself, please, and just give us a little short version of who you are, who your son was, and so forth, if you don't mind, please. Eileen, can you let her know to unmute herself, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'll send it to her right now.
Good evening, all. Okay. I'm here. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Sister Betty, for putting this together. I am just joining in for support and just being able to listen to the stories of others who have been affected by homicide. So my son, Ocasio Feliciano, was killed January 4th of 2023 at a park after school, first day back from winter break. And he'd asked to go to the park with his friends, which he hadn't seen in 2 weeks. So I am here as a resource. I am the executive director of the Ocasio Feliciano Foundation for Safer Futures. And we are here to be able to provide social emotional learning in schools and also advocate for safer futures throughout this country. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Feliciano. Could you please drop your details in the chat so that way everyone can be familiar with your services? I appreciate your share. Sister Betty?
I can't see who else is, Eileen, can you, whoever's next, can you just go to the next person, please?
Yes, give me 1 second. Miss Diana? You may have to unmute. Miss Diana, I still, okay.
Welcome into the space.
Can she hear us? You need to unmute.
She said hello, everyone in the chat.
Oh.
If for some reason it's not working, please drop your information in the chat because we do want to honor everyone that is in this space who may be navigating this heavy grief. I see your details, Miss Feliciano. Thank you so much. Ocasio Feliciano Foundation for, I didn't see it, it just went away quickly. For safer
Sands is on, I think.
future.
Okay. Miss Diana, are you able to say something?
Yes, greetings, everyone. It's an honor to support my sister, whose boots on the ground for families and whose work is recognized and valued and appreciated here in metropolitan Atlanta. I'm here also for support. We work with our collaborative, the Metropolitan Atlanta Violence Prevention Partnership. We are a collaborative that works with families, that works, we are prevention, intervention, and support with families. And we have developed, working on a 10-point plan to support the work that of families, who support the organizations. I see my son is on to support the work of families and youth who are affected by violence, for violence prevention. This is such a I'm trying to find the words. This is such a critical season. And the Bible says for such a time as this. And so we appreciate, love, and support each of you in the movement, in the work, as a for all of us getting into good trouble, because that's what it's going to take. And so we love you, and we are here. We are, Ms. Betty, I can share this at the end. We are, our collaborative is planning some events of support, and we'll share those with you, and I'll share more information at the end.
Thank you so much.
Love you so much.
Thank you. Miss Gwen is just she's been a little modest right by now, but she just, I mean, we go way back.
Way back.
Years. And I just love this lady so much. My other son, which is, she just gave birth to him, but he's also my son, Leonard Dungy. And you talking about a brother that's got boots on the ground. Now, y'all talking about boots on the ground that ain't playing. And this is what we need. Brother Leonard, can you come on and just tell us what you're doing? Now, he on the hill and he ain't no joke. And I just have to keep it real. Leonard?
Good evening, everyone. Always a blessing to be in your presence, Auntie Betty. You know what I mean? So it's good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, so my name is Leonard Dungy. I'm the executive director of Hope Hustlers. And Hope Hustlers is a street outreach organization that works with youth and young adults who are at the highest risk of committing or being victims of violence. And in addition, to support families who have lost loved ones due to violence. And when we say boots on the ground, we're trying to do it. We're trying to be there or be a part of these people's lives, these lovely souls' lives before it happens. And so, pardon me for my tardiness. We actually had 3 participants who were shot this weekend. They didn't do anything wrong. It was just, sometimes it's hard to be in this, in this day and time, you could just be in the vicinity of some other people and get caught by a gunshot. But anyway, God willing, they're all here, and so here I am, and I'm here to support all of you in your efforts and whatever you need me for, Miss Betty. I'm a call away. So, so I'm just honored to be here. On behalf of Hope Hustlers and myself, condolences and prayers out to all the families here. And I'll drop my information in the chat, and if you ever need anything for whatever reason in the community or in this philanthropy space, Hope Hustlers is just a part of make us a part of your support system. Thank you again, and I'm here. So
Thank you so much, Leonard. Leonard was one of the classes that just graduated before the president that's in place now from the violence prevention in DC. They graduated, and he just have a wealth of information and on stopping the violence, and prevention is the key. So, Ms. Yuvelca, can you take us further in so we can get into the meat and get everybody involved? Because we're at a critical time in our life right now. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't hurt home until it hits home. So can you go ahead and help us out, please?
I named this slide the battle cry, and this is Betty Maddox's battle story, and it will be one of those stories that will be included in the book that we are creating. So if many of you in this space want to share your story or your voice, please reach out to me. There's an agreement to sign, but we are serious about making the pen mightier than the sword, and we welcome your stories in that space. And this is how Sister Betty's story is written. My name is Betty Maddox Battle. My son is Michael Anthony Maddox. His sunrise was December 27, 1967. His sunset was May 18, 1993. I didn't find out until May 19. It was a Monday or a Tuesday. I know it was a work day. Some things I remember like they're written on my skin. Some things I still can't hold long enough to read. I believe Allah God is doing a new thing. We put into the universe, what we put into the universe, we get back. My son, Michael, he was 25 years old. He didn't finish school. He was in the world, but the world was not in him. They said he was selling marijuana. That's what the ADA told me. A 16-year-old was involved and shot my son 4 times. I was told that the boy's father was already doing 40 years for statutory rape, and he commanded him. Whatever they say, whatever the world says, I know my child. He was polite, he was handsome, he was cordial, he was spiritual. I took my children to church. I didn't send them. I took them. He worked and he loved his family. A week before his death on a Monday, I believe, my niece, Melody Maddox, she is now the first African-American sheriff in DeKalb County, and I went to where he hung out, and I told him, you don't belong over here. I never heard my son curse. Not that he never did. I just never heard it. I never saw him drink. He said, Mama, you've done all you can for me. I am grown. Now it's time for you to see about Brian. Brian was 9 then. As I walked away, my son called after me, Mama, I love you. Just keep my insurance up. Those were the last words I heard from him. I was at work in DeKalb County permits, alcohol, gun, tax, all types of permit, when the phone rang between 10:30 and 11 a.m. A woman asked, are you Michael's mother? She said she was Ben's wife. Ben was Michael's childhood friend. I heard screaming in the background. It was Ben wailing. She said, I'm sorry, Michael was shot last night. I thought I was dreaming. A female co-worker saw my face change. I asked, what hospital? Silence. Then, Fulton County Morgue. I dropped the phone and sat down. My body froze. My mind in shock. Everything stopped moving. The supervisor came. My words were trapped. My coworker filled in until I could breathe. They asked me to identify my son. I said I would know my son by the pin in his right hip from a motorcycle accident when he was hit as a boy. The lieutenant over SWAT at the time drove me home. They wouldn't let me drive. The police chief came to my house with roses and a very personal letter of his loss. I still have that letter. He cried with me and tried to console me by sharing his story. We didn't let our youngest go to school. My daughter came home, saw the police cars lined up and down the street and looked at me and said, Michael? I said, he's gone, and we all fell apart together. We buried him on Memorial Day. I had borrowed money from the credit union to take my children on vacation that weekend. Michael wasn't living with me then, but he told me he had insurance. The insurance company first said that they wouldn't pay, and that policy was paid without fail. My supervisor, who was in the school to be an attorney, told me what I needed to do. I got the letter I needed. They paid within weeks, not months. By the grace of Allah God, I didn't have to borrow more to bury my child. Grace handled what I could not. We held the funeral at St. Philip African Methodist Episcopal Church. I spoke. I didn't want to, but I did. At the repast, I didn't attend, but family, friends, the community, and co-workers were very supportive. They were there. People call it crazy when grief makes its own rules, but it isn't crazy. It's survival. I had police academy training in the early 1970s. In my knowledge, the police always gets there first and they seal off the crime scene. I testified in court sometimes. I know how death becomes paperwork and how procedures keep moving when the heart can't. I try to be patient with families because emotions will do what they do. There are no words in those rooms. The 88 told me the bullet hit Michael's organs and ricocheted. He was gone before he hit the ground. I did not want to see the photos. I've seen enough through my work. I did not want to see my son that way. I only wondered if he suffered. I tried therapy once through workers' comp. I gave the counselor a chance, knowing that representation and attunement was not there. The way she spoke to me, it wasn't empathetic or warm. I left and said, "This is not for me," because the way someone greets you matters. And if you haven't done your own work, you can't help me with mine. What helped me, though, was family, love, and remembering him. Michael was funny. He lifted weights. He was athletic. He showed up for us. It was a tough time for me and my family because shortly after losing my son to violence, 4 months later, his baby, my grandbaby, transitioned. She was diagnosed with brain cancer at 3 years old, and it also added more to the devastation that we were already feeling and that I felt. We lost them both in 1993. There are still fragments I'm still sorting in my mind to this day because at the forefront of everything, violence just makes no sense. It has also been a while since I have shared his story, and I don't think I've ever spoken in details of my whole story of loss. I just went straight into advocacy mode. After thinking about what happened to my son, I walked up the street in our subdivision, feeling so distant. I just felt numb. Yet I felt like I was seeing signs, not hallucinations, but a universal sign like Allah God was trying to tell me something. About a week later, I was going to a salon in Decap. I kept my hair tapered and I started crying on the way. There's no explaining that kind of cry. It felt as though my soul broke, and I didn't want anyone else to hurt the way I hurt. I asked Allah God, why? My son was a good one. He was one of the best. My tears just flowed. The violence doesn't stop. It hasn't stopped, and it keeps happening. In my job, the worst scenes weren't only homicides, they were suicides too, one after another. I grieved with those families as I grieved. We grieved together in the shop, with relatives, with neighbors. The community held itself the best we could. The violence kept coming, and so did the news, capturing story after story. But a few minutes of airtime is not enough awareness that these killings, these shootings, and all this violence must stop. I started visiting other grieving mothers and grieving families. I held them tight in my arms and collected their tears. I was there for first visits and for visits throughout. I wanted to give the mothers, the fathers, the children, the grandparents, the kind of support I wish someone could have given me without end. Faith carried me. 1 Corinthians 13:13, love that does not fail, even when everything else does. I am human. I say what I know, and I hold what I cannot say yet. I know my son. He loved me, and I loved him. I heard his last, "Mama, I love you," and I kept it because mothers keep what our children ask us to keep. After Michael was taken, I could have folded up. I could have stayed inside with my grief, but Allah God told me, "Betty, you're still here and there's work for you to do." So I stepped out and I began to pour into other families who were hurting like me. And that's how GRIEVE was born. Grieving relatives in every violent event. I started it so families like mine wouldn't feel they were standing in the fire alone. I know what it feels like to get that phone call. I know what it feels like to bury your child on Memorial Day. And I know what it feels like to have people try to tell you that your son's life, your loved one's life, didn't matter because of whatever doing, because he was in the street, or whatever the story was. A loved one has been lost. And that's why I do this work, because our children matter. Every single one matters. Even an adult is somebody's child. Through Grieve, we've gone into churches, schools, and mosques, every place where our people gather, because grief has no boundaries. We talk to our young people about consequences, about drugs, about alcohol, about gangs, about gun violence, and I tell them straight. Once that bullet leaves the chamber, you can't call it back. I've been blessed to serve my community for more than 25 years as a crime scene investigator with DeKalb County Police, and later as public education specialist with DeKalb County Fire Rescue. I've been through the FBI Citizens Academy and Rockdale County Citizens Academy. I've sat with grieving mothers and fathers, and I've spoken in legislative halls. I've seen firsthand that change is possible when we stand together, and we must. And we must stand together. We must strategize so that no more bullets leave any chamber. But I can't do this alone. None of us can. Every time I go to a funeral, every time I sit with a family, every time I hear another child or a loved one has been lost, I know we need more hands, more hearts, and more help. And yes, more donations, more funding. It is absolutely necessary to keep doing this work. I do not want any more children. And like I've mentioned before, even adults are somebody's child. I don't want any more human beings dying to violence. I don't want any more suffering like I did and like the rest of the families that have shared their stories. And the truth is this, with this 2025 administration, funding for violence prevention, for grief support, for therapy like brain spotting for families like ours, especially in marginalized communities, has been cut. We all have people we love, and all humans bleed red. We must come together. That means we depend on our communities. We depend on you. No donation is too big or too small. Whatever you give, it goes right back into helping families, building programs, and keeping the fight alive. So please be part of our movement. Support us at paypal.com/PayPalMe/Grieving Relatives. We have to keep this fight going. The violence must stop. No more bullets, no more hate, no more bullying, no more violence. And until it does, families need to know they are not alone.
Thank you, Yuvelca, for sharing that. I couldn't have done it. There's just no way, but I just want to say thank you. I see Mr. Jimmy is on. Mr. Jimmy, did you just want to tell who you are? And just give us a little brief synopsis of you know, who you are, if you don't mind, and your sons.
Unmute, please.
Unmute. He needs to unmute, Aline, please.
Who were we saying? Mr. Jimmy? Miss Betty,
Hi,
you.
everybody. I hope
Hi.
everybody's doing fine. You in my prayer. You will be in my prayer tonight. I'm Jimmy Hill. I'm the father of two murdered sons. One of my sons, Curtis Jordan, he was murdered in 2012 through community gun battle at the age of 18. And we fought and we fought and we fought. And I know when I first got that call, it was rage in me. And I wanted revenge because I felt like somebody had took something from me. And they, as a matter of fact, they did. And I was having talked to my mother, and so I sit down with my mother because I was willing to give my life to get revenge for my son. And I had to talk to my mother, and I did it the way she wanted me to do it. And I got out there and advocated in front of Atlanta City Hall, in front of everywhere, in front of train stations, in front of the courthouse, and went to the neighborhood. And the two guys got life, both of them got life. Plus, and I really thank God for giving me the strength to make it through this ordeal. If I would have been, I lost my mind. And my other son, Jim Atkinson, he was murdered January 22nd, 2019. That was 10 days before the Super Bowl here in Atlanta by former Atlanta police officer Sean Kim. And my son was murdered. And I really found out about this system. It made me, it awakened me and made me see what this system was about. And even though this officer, my son was unarmed surrender, complied while posing no threat, and he still shot him. After being surrounded by 4 officers with guns drawn in that table. And he was the only one that shot. This officer, even though Fulton County Grand Jury indicted this officer in December 2022 and charged him with a felony murder, aggravated assault, and violation of the attorney filed a motion, had to move to federal court where they expect more favorable treatment through qualified, favorable and lenient treatment through qualified immunity. And about 3 months ago, the federal judge dismissed charges against this officer through qualified immunity. And that's what I am now. So I'm out here and I'm advocating. I'm continuing to advocate for gun violence, against gun violence. I'm advocating for police brutality. I'm just advocate for anything, any type of injustice. And injustice anywhere continue to be a threat to justice everywhere. And I'm just strictly about fighting injustice. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your raw emotions, especially, I mean, vulnerable and transparent. And I appreciate you sharing that in the space, because when someone does something to us, we want to do something back. And how do we do that without putting ourselves in prison? Because they're quick to arrest us if we retaliate. And this is a reason why we're putting this book together, because not only do we want to raise our voices that a murder has occurred, but it's also larceny. You stole something from me. You stole an opportunity for me to have more memories with my loved one. So I appreciate you in this space, sir, and I appreciate your share.
Amen. Thank you.
How many people die from gun-related injuries in the US each month? What is your guess? Can you drop it in the comments? I know there are many professionals in the space doing the work, but I'm still curious to know, how many people died from gun-related injuries in the US each month? Eileen, I'm not able to see the chat, so if anybody puts anything in the comments, please make me aware.
Absolutely. I haven't seen anybody drop anything in yet.
All right, I'll just give a few more minutes. What do you think that number is for the month?
Miss Gwendolyn says about 4,000.
About 4,000. Anyone else before I move forward? Anyone else want to take a guess? How many people die from gun-related injuries in the US each month?
Miss Betty says about 280.
Can I interject real quick? Well, gun violence data is technically it's counted annually, and while some local jurisdictions may keep monthly statistics in order to, to be able to compile that data lately. So annually, I know it's around 53,000. But I guess if you want to divide that by 12 months, it's about 4,000 a month.
You're
A
correct.
little over 4,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. If everyone could see the next screen, you're correct. It's about 3,800 human beings because we don't get the correct information. I've been doing a lot of research, and as you can see, this was an estimate in August 2024, and they updated this information August 12th, 2025. And this is just another sign that we do not get accurate information. And also, when they do the numbers for gun-related injuries, civilians and law enforcement, their records are separate. Those numbers are not included. And when I did the research for that same month in August 2024, specifically in Georgia, they said at least 8 people died from gun violence. Now, they gave us the information on the 4 men that were killed during a shooting at Pleasant Grove Park in Dalton, but when it came to the 5 Georgia law enforcement officers that died in the line of duty, they didn't give us the circumstances around those details. Another important fact, firearms are used in the majority of homicides and suicides, 84% homicides, 67% suicides, which are some things that we don't consider, the suicide portion of firearms. So then we come to another question. So how do we actually, as a collective, stop gun violence? Some say get rid of the guns. Many say get rid of the Second Amendment, but really, what are your honest thoughts? We've all have experienced loss or have been very connected to loss. How do we stop gun violence? What are your thoughts? If anyone cares to share, give us your honest thoughts and drop it in the comments. Unless I'm not able to see raised hands, if anybody has a raised hand and would like to share. How do we stop gun violence? Because it's going to take all of us, and we all have to be of one mind. Leonard, I see a message up here that says you raised your hand. Please share.
Yeah. So it has been statistically proven that gun violence reduction, I mean, stopping it is one thing. That's a whole other issue that we'll address later. But reducing it involves reaching out to those who are, again, at the highest risk for committing violence and or being victims of violence, and determining what are the root causes and why are these people committing this violence. It's generally attached to poverty. With that being said, it also happens in clusters. And so we have to take a public health approach to violence, which means the community-based organizations, along with local philanthropy and local governments have to address the social determinants of health of all of our people, whether they be in the school, whether they're coming through the court system, whether they're just in the community at large. And the issue has been is that even with social work and social services, we have not reached out to those who need it the most first. And so that's the part of is really the people who commit violence are less than 1% of the total population. But if nobody addresses that 1%, they cause 70, 80% of the problem. So in essence, gun violence can be stopped over time. And when you say stop, then that's when the gun laws come in. And I mean, the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. The problem is that guns outside of, we're talking about, you used to be able to have to register to get a gun. And that's still the case, but there's too many other cases of ghost guns, which is a whole other conversation. If y'all want to ask me what they are, we'll talk about it later. But in essence, you can actually build your own gun or buy one on the internet. So that is one problem. Now, as far as reducing violence, again, we have to address the social determinants of health of our communities at large. And it takes a whole, we have to recreate the village in a sense.
Right.
And so that's, I'm gonna lower my hand now.
Thank you for your share. I appreciate it.
Miss
Very
Ingrid
in-depth.
says stop selling guns.
Absolutely. And if I'm just going to stop that screen for 1 second, because Leonard did bring it into, Mr. Leonard did bring it into the space. And I just want to also just show, we were going through, we didn't finish the list, but I do want to share this, and I do want to further the conversation, Mr. Leonard, when you do have a chance, because this is important when we're going to strategize and mobilize as one unit to make transformative change in legislation, because they do know numbers, and we do have to understand what's going on with the bills that don't make it into law. So if I want to share what we were putting together, like I said, this is not a complete list, but we were putting together what needs to be understood here. If everyone can see my screen, we pulled up just Georgia bills, a quick list. And if you notice here, there have been bills that have been introduced, but look, opposed. Add Georgia World Congress Center facilitates to places where carrying weapons, long guns is banned. That was opposed. Why? You know, we have to understand what passed, what needs support, and what has been opposed. Set rules for storing firearms inside a motor vehicle or a boat. Opposed. Ban gun possession, transport by people convicted of misdemeanor family violence. Opposed. This is on the watch, Second Amendment Preservation Act. But look at this one. Let law enforcement either destroy or sell certain arms. Opposed. Create a crime for failing to adequately secure a firearm, loaded or unloaded. Opposed. Require owners of assault weapons to carry liability insurance. Opposed. Require a 10-day waiting period for purchase transfer of certain firearms. Opposed. Pediatric Health Safe Storage Act. Safe storage to protect minors. Opposed. Again, safe storage tax credit. Opposed. Require universal background checks for all firearm transfers. Opposed. Require a 3-day waiting period for certain gun purchases and transfers. Opposed. That's a lot of oppose. And I firmly believe that through my legislative work with other nonprofits, when we target the bills and legislation along with our stories, collectively, we can make transformative change. What do you think about that, Mr. Leonard?
I'm glad you asked. Earlier, we'll call her Auntie Betty, Aunt Betty, but she mentioned that I was fortunate enough to be chosen by University of Chicago Crime Lab about CVI and CVI's community violence intervention. Okay. It was the Leadership Academy. It was a cohort of 20, it was 30 leaders from 20 cities. And what we did is we established a national language for what's considered now CVI. Now, I'll give you an example. My mother and Ms. Betty have been doing this work for 20 years. They were doing it before there was a name for it. Okay. And so during the Biden administration, there was funding, and there's actually a bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was signed by Mitch McConnell and various other Republicans as well as Democrats. And there was over $900 million in funding, which was retracted once the new administration got in. And not only that, it's a whole mess now with the new administration, because let me give you another example. People are talking about violence intervention and the work that I do, but this administration also got rid of the whole ATF and the DEA. The ATF is directly responsible for guns coming into this country and being on our streets. That's their job. So they're no longer an ATF or a DEA in essence. And reduced the FBI by, I think it was 120 FBI jobs or FBI agents or vacated, their positions were vacated. So it's very difficult now to really understand what bills, because even the Republicans and the Democrats don't know what bills to vote for and what not to vote for, because it's just a whole mess. But at the end of the day, that work that we have done from, that's why, my organization as well as others, but I represented Atlanta and the Southeast region at the White House for the work that we have done. And so these are, partially my mother, Ms. Betty's data, which, transferred to recently. If you look at nationally over the last 4 years, every major city has had at least a 20 to 30% reduction in homicides and shootings. For example, here in Atlanta, since in the last 4 years, since they've actually been documented, this is police records. We also partner with Grady Hospital, obviously, for those gunshot victims. But in the last, just in, I'm not even gonna give you the last 4 years. The last year or 2025 to date, the city of Atlanta homicides are down 32% and violent crimes and violent shootings are down 21%. In DeKalb County, homicides are down 34% and shootings are down like 23 or 24%. So this work is, has been working for years. The issue is that um, for a while, the police were taking credit for it and there was no funding. And then there was funding and now there's no funding again because he took that whole 900 million and it didn't affect me because I'm not directly funded. My organization's not directly funded by the federal government for the overall budget, but we did receive some. The problem is that $900 million was for cities like Chicago and LA and Detroit, New York, who were awarded grants totaling a good 30 to 40 million dollars just to start the work and then get that money snatched from you. And so as far as legislation, there is legislation in place that bipartisan, that's a federal, that's the Senate and the House both agreed on that, and it was a bipartisan act. So I think we need to refocus and stay on what's currently available before we try and do anything new, because until we get to midterms, it's all just going to be a mess. They don't know who to vote for anymore. They're actually working across the aisle, which is the first thing first time I've ever seen that in the last 10 years. So that's the state of the union as we speak. And when we're speaking of the current administration sending, it's all an act and we're show because you're sending troops into areas where crime is down, but it just makes it, it's a whole narrative. And that's been the main problem with policy, is the narrative that not only the administration, but local and state and federal politicians don't know what to vote for anymore.
I 100% agree with you, sir. Miss Sands, I've seen your hand up, Sister Sands. Would you like to share? Just unmute. No worries.
And I see Miss Tish. Hello, Miss Tish. I didn't see her before. Hello. Leonard answered it on Saturday at the King Center. Two of our partners, the Georgia Center for Georgia Majority for Gun Safety and Be Smart, the two advocacy organizations, are sharing just what Leonard said. And she just shared, Heather shared the frustrations in terms of legislation, and those a bill is introduced, and because of the composition of our legislation right now, of our legislators, that they don't get to the floor to be addressed. We Leonard and Dr. V even presented and supported legislation. I think Miss Betty, you were there that day as well, and they tried, and so it's not gonna stop us though. Not gonna stop us now. We're gonna keep on
Just real
moving.
quick, I just want to add real quick. The only violence that is up right now is political violence. And the violence in our communities where we live is down. Political violence and violence in Minnesota and the Catholic school and
That's
that kind
right.
of violence is up. Domestic terrorism is up. But the narrative is when you watch the news, all they talk about is, you see us getting shot, black and brown people.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. I agree with you. I can't wait to have further conversation with you as well. If I may continue to share. So we came out with the core message that guns don't act by themselves. It is people influenced by trauma, anger, fear, or manipulation who make choices. It is a mindset with bad habits, and we cannot forget about racism that is taught. Violence is preventable. We see that in our communities through self-awareness, after-school programs that teach conflict resolution. We have collaborated with Y2BUnique, who has programs and initiatives for after-school programs to teach conflict resolution, emotional intelligence. We offer trauma-responsive workshops, community accountability, and safer systems that can stop, just like Mr. Leonard said, the harm before it even starts. And we all have the responsibility, all of us, children, adults, and even law enforcement play a role in building safer communities to stop the violence.
And like Mr. Leonard just stated, people are using guns to resolve conflict.
Absolutely. So how do we make changes and how do we advocate effectively? Because one is too many. We cannot bear any more losses at all. And we do want to give a moment to share those that have shared their stories with us and to let them know that we see you, we hear you, and your loved one will never, ever be forgotten. We will push their stories forward and we will make the pen mightier than the sword. So we could just take one moment and just look at every single photo, face, loved one here, and just say their name. We have Michael, Jarvis, Grayson, Donald, Dre, Curtis, Jimmy, Amira, Javis, and Jabril. You will not be forgotten. And the many more that we did not put on here. We are in this battle collectively until the end, until transformative change occurs. I would just like to give a moment for anyone in the space that sees their loved one on here to know that we hear you and we see you and we're with you. No one has asked them, truly, what is their whirlpool of grief? Because right here is an idea, just an imaging of what grief looks like and may be like for families that navigate this space. Bereavement is what happens to you. Grief is what you feel, and mourning is what you do. Just take a moment so we could fully understand the support that is needed for these families that experience the direct trauma of this type of loss, and for those that are with them and next to them that experience the secondary trauma that occurs from such violence. Do we ask them? Do they notice what active trauma feels like? Because sometimes we can see someone's reflexes, but are these professionals, is law enforcement, those that we sit across, trauma informed? Because in their bodies, they can feel it. They can feel the pounding heart, the shaking, the short breath, the sweating, the headaches, and the stomach pains, and that doesn't stop from one day to the next. How about what's going on in their mind? We brought in the mental health in this space. the intrusive images, the time loss, it feeling unreal, that's called disassociation, and alertness spikes every time they hear someone else's story that resonates with their own. We can't see this from the outside, only through their reflexes unless they share. But we definitely see behaviors, the hypervigilance, the sleep loss, the irritability, the numbing, and the withdrawing. And this is why we cannot rush people in their grief. Some wait years, some are actively right now in active trauma, waiting 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and sometimes for others, what seems like a lifetime with no answers, still seeking justice. We need to be mindful of what active trauma looks like. And I push for trauma competency and responsiveness, especially from law enforcement. My push is that every single professional that sits across someone that has experienced loss, and especially law enforcement, must be trauma competent and trained so we don't go through unnecessary loss, even if we know that someone is in wrongdoing, because that's always used as an excuse in the news, almost as if they merited the outcome, but no one deserves to die. How about community level trauma? The collective stress when we see protest, and in today's political climate, the militarization, in some places curfews, and the media saturation. How about racial battle fatigue? I'm just putting in languaging here because I want to get to the point where, right here where it says when perpetrator from dominant culture, the history impunity amplifies injury, and a lot of people don't know what that means. And I put the definition there. That means when a person or group repeatedly commit harmful acts without being held accountable. We know who they are. The damage inflicted is much worse than a single isolated incident. And the lack of justice, which is what our communities, marginalized communities, Black and Brown communities experience, the lack of justice, compounds the initial harm with psychological, social, and long-term trauma. And they expect us to get back to normal immediately after such a loss, and we don't receive enough support. And how about when intra-community, justice segregation, poverty, guns, and disinvestment? And that piece right there, because on the next slide, I'm going to share, why are we really here? Because just like Mr. Leonard shared, of course, the reports and the research say that violent crimes has declined recently, but gun violence still remains devastating. And firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens. Of course, next to suicide, but that's the tool that they use. And police-involved deaths still remain high, and their numbers are separate and they're not recorded alongside our numbers. And when we say Black on Black crimes, I can't take it anymore. That's a misframe. We should be saying that it's intra-community violence and not Black on Black crime. And I say this because in the spaces that I am in, and even being Afro-Latina, not all Spanish-speaking people are the same. And not all Black people are the same. You have American Black, African Black, mixed race, mixed cultures. And every single time they use Black on Black crime, it falls on us, our image. And if we really look at the numbers, the top number of violence is not us, actually. And Mr. Leonard, if you have anything to say about that, I'm willing to
Yes.
hear.
Yes, thanks. And that's part of what, I was speaking on earlier, is because especially in this administration, and it's been going on for a while, so it's not like, I can't blame it all on Trump, but the narrative has been that is the case, that Black people are violent, Black and brown people create most of the violence. That is statistically not true nationally. First of all, we're in the minority. And it also says that there are more that, there are more youth and young adults, Black and brown youth and young adults that are dying to gun violence. That's only partially true. What is true is that gun violence is the number one cause of death amongst Black and brown youth and young adults. But it just recently, I think in the last 10 years, overtook car accidents and suicide. And so while that part is true, even with that being true, gun violence and homicides are down in the community. And so, as you said earlier, one is too many. But I think the narrative has been such is because politicians tend to use fear to sway votes. Now, the other side, or whatever side, I'm not on either side, I'm on what's right. But the other side is starting to see that, oh, this is not, these are not the facts. It's not, I mean, when you look at the news, every time that there's a shooting, it's a Black or a brown person. That's because I live in Atlanta. And so, that may be the case, but if that's all you show, then the public is going to believe that that's all that is happening. But that is not true, because the amount of shootings, I can say this, we've dealt with shootings in the last month, and that shooting that they had at that Catholic school, one shooting took out half of, you know what I mean? I'm gonna give you an example. We saw, as far as youth, we saw 6 youth in the month of August. How many got shot in that Catholic church? That's one shooting. So one person, one child, one human being is too many, but we need to keep the narrative straight. And I'm going to end by saying we have to press our local politicians for this to move forward. I think on the federal level, it's aware, like I said, there's a Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. We spoke before, as my mother and Ms. Betty, they were saying, we spoke before the state Senate. And there were Republicans who understood, because it's not just it's not just an issue in the Black community anymore. Appalachia is nowhere near Bankhead. So with that being said, there is some buy-in, but politicians are only going to move when they see that the people are moving, and they're moving for or against you, but we're moving together. And so I think a lot of times we have an ecosystem, a community violence ecosystem, Ms. Betty and others in this room are a part of. But it's important that we stick together and move together, because then that's when you start to change policy. That's when politicians start to, actually pay attention. I'm gonna give you a quick story, and again, I'm going to wrap it up. But excuse me if I'm long-winded. Politicians there, City of Atlanta. There are politicians that said that the people that do my kind of work call us thugs because we have lived experience. The same politician I sat in DC in a committee with before the president and the vice president of the United States. But when we got back to Atlanta, they called us thugs. But I don't care. You can call me a thug because I saved 3 lives this weekend. So I'll be that. But that's what I was going to say. We got to change the narrative, and we got to do it together. I appreciate everybody here. I'm going to go ahead and mute.
Thank you so much for your
I'm
share.
sorry. I'd like to chime in just a little bit to echo what Leonard said, and he's absolutely correct. And that's what I be telling people all the time. Until we collectively come together, and advocate and hold our elected officials accountable, nothing is going to change. But they look at us as votes. We got to hold our judges, because that's an elected position. We got to help these families and show up in court and support other grieving families. Secondly, I think they're not telling, like he said, they're not telling the truth. And I have been advocating on calling a press conference and calling out these people. You know what I'm saying? We the people have the power, not the politicians. You understand? So until we collectively, my personal opinion, come together and have a press conference, because right about now, it said earlier, you know, the only violence I see that's taking place is political violence. You understand? So I say collectively, we need to come together and have a press conference, but we need to bring the stats and we need to get these families together. You know, the preacher, the teacher, the mosque, and whoever else want to involve. And then we got to let the people know, because there's so much hate out here now. You understand? So I just kind of wanted to piggyback. They're not telling the truth how many people are really committing suicide in this day and time. So thank you for allowing me to, you know, to speak.
And talking about moving collectively and building an ecosystem, I want to introduce into the space Marlon Johnson from Way Up. She does have a program, the after school program and initiatives that I mentioned earlier for conflict resolution. So Marlon, please share your voice into this space.
Well, first I want to say good evening and apologies that I was late. Unfortunately, over on Friday, I was notified by our advocate that we had a case scheduled for today. And what was interesting, and most of you here know who I am. We've done a lot of things collectively. Much love and gratitude. We're going to continue to build in this space and build this community. So I'm very grateful for the work and efforts that everyone, Yuvelca, you, Mama Betty, has put forward, as we all have, and everyone's here supporting, and may we continue to grow. But the issue that I had, it started this morning, but then we had to come back this afternoon. I experienced today in court, because it wasn't the presiding judge that was, so the defendant, and not to get too deep into the case, but he went against what he was supposed to, and I may be using the wrong wording, but what was it? He didn't honor what the requirement was being on home monitor, which is the bond requirements with curfew. For 30 days, they could not read any of his activity. So earlier this morning, he was about to walk out with the judge, and the way she ran her courtroom, it was as if she's trying to get another show. They are taking these matters as judges as a joke. And she, even with every case, she had a little saying like, yeah, hearing back some little lingo that she was doing. It was so unprofessional. And I'm not using racism, but she was Caucasian. But everyone was laughing, joking, and the person who's being charged for murder, who broke his bond with being on home monitor, was almost able to walk out of court because his attorney wasn't there until later this afternoon. He was about to be able to walk out and say, oh, they adjusted the bond, and because she didn't have all of the information, I had to talk to the DA's representing attorney that handles all of that. And he was almost ready to shut me down because the judge didn't understand. She didn't have all the information in front of her, and he couldn't find it. And not to get too deep, but I had to speak up. And had it not been for my advocate there, they would have shut me down, because he was just speaking to me as if he was all over the place. And I said, no, she did not hear. She wasn't aware that there was a second that it had been they had been indictment. It was two indictments on the case. She only was referencing the beginning. So there was okay. I'm sorry. But what I'm saying is in agreement with we have to come together and challenge who these judges are because they are not professional. And after I had to speak up in order for the DA attorney had to go to the judge after he was trying to dismiss me. And then my advocate spoke. She said, no, I heard the judge did not have the right information. And the young man, he was very clever in knowing what to say. She was about to allow him to be dismissed and not get justice again, getting away with murder. So, and I know I'm all over the place because I just made it home. But if I had not spoke up and the detective said, well, normally, Miss Johnson, your attorney would be here, but because he was trying to make it, and I said, no, my attorney has been on top of everything. I'm not addressing the issues of the attorney. I'm addressing she didn't have the correct information and you weren't able to speak it up. Did you see on your computer? He said, no, I wasn't able to find it at the time. I said, so can you please speak to her and have him come back and discuss how the matter is going to be handled? Because what he said, pretty much she was going to go along with whatever he spoke on his behalf. And I know I may sound like I'm all over the place, but what I realized, and my husband didn't hear the details, but the advocate, she heard and she said, no, Miss Johnson, you're absolutely correct. She did not have the right information. And she explained to the DA's attorney that he needs to speak to the judge to make sure that we're clear, or maybe have the judge who gave the made the adjustments. But it's so many things that I've never experienced. Actually, now going through trial is if you don't pay attention and if you do not speak up, they are so overwhelmed and inundated with cases that if you don't catch it, it will get slipped through the cracks. And this is people's lives that are involved. And thank God that we're here going through the process, but even in the process, you still need advocacy. We still need voices. We still need more people present. And I realize I haven't, I should be blowing up our network saying, if you're available, can you please come to court because we need a lot more presence in many of these spaces. So this is a start. And I'm so grateful even bringing us together to have the conversations. There's a lot of information that I did not know, even going through trial, that some of you have already been through the process, even been in law enforcement and work with the law. We definitely have to build and have more information available. So and I'm grateful most of you know about Way Up. That's my heart, and that is my son. That was my son's heart and passion. Moving from Georgia to New York, he saw it was just like night and day. Seeing that music, that's where he learned how to play trumpet, and he was able to excel in band with them cutting programs in the city. It's organized. So not to take too much time, I'm grateful that I will continue to celebrate the lives of our sons and our daughters and our loved ones who've transitioned and continue to fight to that we don't have to endure and continue to see us carrying this heartache. So love and gratitude to all of you.
Thank you for bringing your voice into the space, Marlon. We appreciate you keeping us up to date. We know that you had a tough day today, and this type of situation does not help anyone in active trauma, because as we know, in trauma, there's no language. In trauma, you can't even put your thoughts together because trauma plays back over here in the subcortical structure of the brain, and they bring us over here to the frontal lobe so we can try to make sense of things, and it doesn't help. if we're not fully seen and we're not fully heard, and I have to be forced to recall things when you're asking me the same questions over and over again, and then waiting the time that you have waited, what was 3 years before you even get the hope of some kind of justice. So I see you, sis. I hear you. We are all collectively in this space to come together so we can make not change, but transformation, because that's what is needed for us. Sister Betty, we have about 11 minutes left. I just want to be mindful of everybody else's time. I am complete with what I had to share. So please take over, and I'm here to be the tail
I
of your comment.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. I feel her pain and I empathize with her. And this is what I keep telling the parents. If we could get some of these mothers together collectively and go in those courtrooms and sit in on some of these cases, you understand, just for show, so they can see that we are united. I believe it'll make a difference in whoever cases is being heard. You know, I do believe from my heart of hearts that it will make a difference, because it is, like I said earlier in the program, that it's an elected position. So we need to hold them accountable. These are our children that are being killed, the Black and brown. So, you know, I concur. We just gotta strategize. First of all, we gotta organize. Then we gotta strategize, and then we gotta mobilize. You know, because you know, time is of the essence. Thank you.
The floor is open for the last 10 minutes. If anybody would like to unmute their mic and share their experience, share the conversation that we have had, your thoughts, and anything that you want to add into the space, your voice is welcomed here. That includes you too, Eileen.
Now is the time to speak. We can use some of the, you know, the thoughts and recommendations, you know, on what to do. Leonard, are you still on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what do you feel that in my opinion, you're out there and you see what's going on as far as these families who are grieving, whether it be intra-community violence or police violence, you know, with everything that's going on. How can we as grieving families, you know, support?
I think that, you know, as I've always said, Ms. Betty, that in this ecosystem, as we call it, everyone has their space. And so your voices is what got us to the White House to begin with. It's the voices of the people on this live, on this Zoom, that got us to the White House to begin with. And I just think that, and I've always said this, and I say this to, you know, participants, politicians, government people, and other people in this work, that it's important that as we reach out, and the first thing is to heal ourselves and each other. And so we have to heal ourselves first, obviously, so we can heal others. But after that, your support comes in, and then that's your role in the ecosystem. I have lost friends and family to gun violence. And Ms. Betty, you know my past. I was never a predator, but yeah, I was one of those people. And so, but my lived experience is what's brought me to where I am. I have never lost a child. I couldn't imagine. Um, but you know, you are the voice. And I've always told you that, Ms. Betty, you are the voice. You are the reason why I do what I do. And so I think collectively, just moving forward, and I think we lose track of, you know, well, we get caught in the funding thing. Because trust me, funding comes and funding goes. So that goes for whatever level you're on. And so I think before and not necessarily before funding. It's obvious everyone here that I know in the ecosystem, and Ms. Betty and Marlon, and obviously my mom, we all do this from the heart. So moving forward, we have to support each other in whatever it is. Um, because we have to show numbers. We have to show. So Ms. Betty, press conferences is great. You know, we've been to a few of them together. You know, you've held them, I've held them, mom's held them. And what we've showed is some solidarity. But in order to move forward for people, politicians, and I keep saying politicians because they're really the only challenge that we have right now. We do this anyway. We know who's hurting. We know what families need what. But politically, we have to stick together in numbers and show up in numbers so they don't have a choice but to listen and be a part of it. Because politicians, they don't want to miss out on nothing.
And I agree with you, Mr. Leonard, but in harmony with what you're saying, I want to add a couple of more points because we can speak all we want until the cows come home. And it'll be just one presentation after another and showing up in numbers. I think that now is the time, and I'm talking just from experience with working with nonprofits. Like I wrote the book, The Stillbirth Prevention Advocate. And this book, we brought it to Capitol Hill and it pushed Biden after a 15-year battle with us trying to get some bills pushed. It pushed him to at least push one bill into law where we could at least name stillbirth prevention in Title IX so we can get funding because funding is important. I know that we say funding, but those funding and those donations are important so we can cast a longer and wider net. Right now, what we're coming together to do here is put these stories into print. Because if we're talking about education being important, then how much more powerful is backing that up with a book and bringing that book to the library, bringing that book to the classrooms, and also presenting that book as we speak. So that way, if you don't remember my story, you can read it again. And I don't have to re-traumatize myself to say that story over and over. So I agree with you 100%, sir, because numbers count. That's all the politicians, the congressmen, and the representatives see, but some of them are also sitting so high up that they forget about the little people, and we got to bring them down to earth, so to speak. And we have to move strategically so we can get the funding to get a busload to go to Capitol Hill, and you three take that corner, and you three take that corner, and you four take that floor. I think that we can cast a longer and wider net, sir. With that, I'm complete. Thank you for letting me share.
Totally
Yes,
agree. I just
yes,
one thing I'm gonna add real quick is that let's start locally because I've been to the White House and they promised us a whole lot of money, and then as soon as somebody else became the president, he snatched all the money. So, but locally, we need to get our local politicians motivated because right now, I'm not just trying to be sly
No,
here.
I agree with you because even the
Yeah, because
crime
they,
on a local scale, you feel it
yeah,
because it's local,
exactly.
not only national, but local at home. Take care of home first. Absolutely. 100% with you, sir. And I'm here to stand alongside you and even behind you if I got to hold your back up. But I'm here, with you in this fight. Sister Betty, the last 3.5 minutes.
real quick, I think that's a great idea. Is starting locally. We got to start at home. Why go over there and try to clean somebody else's house up when our own house is dirty? So hopefully, we can go ahead and sit down and organize and strategize and get this going. I'd like to say, on behalf of Grieving Relatives and every violent event and Way Up, and also what you're doing with your organization, Yuvelca Y2BUnique Creations and GRIEVE Soul Work. I want to say from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for, sharing your time with us, educating us, and motivating us to do what needs to be done because it's going to happen again. We're going to meet, and I want everybody to know that we will be meeting the third Monday of every month from 6 to 8, and it will be the same Zoom link. We're going to have to sit down and we're going to have to strategize, and we're going to have to do it now. Now is the time. So when the time comes when we need to be in court to support what's going on with certain cases, like what Marlon is going through, you know, you show up in numbers, and I think you would get the local politicians' attention, because we are considered votes. So thank you so very much, and hopefully, God willing, I pray we'll be able, you know, to meet again on the third Monday. Thank you so much to everybody. And I pray that everybody will have a good evening and a blessed week. Thank you so very much. Anybody else? If not, we're going to end this Zoom meeting, but not our love. Thank you all so very much.
Can you
Thank
close us
you.
out in a prayer, please? My elder in the space, can you opened us up in prayer? Can you please close us out?
Yes, ma'am. Eternal Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to share, Eternal Father God, what we need to do to make this world a better world, but not only this world, but our families, our communities, Eternal Father God. We thank you and we honor you. We ask you for safe travel throughout our journey this week and from now on. This is our humble prayer. We pray. Amen.
Amen.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Amen. Love and
Thank you.
blessings
Love
to
you
you.
all.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Night.